Good morning. The judge in Kyle Rittenhouse trial says lawyers cannot call the two people he killed victims. Rittenhouse killed two people and wounded another man with an AR-15 style weapon. The judge says victim is too loaded, but will let lawyers call them rioters, looters, or arsonists. We talk about that this morning with our panelists, Black Press USA contributor Barrington Salmon and Washington Informer reporter James Wright. But first, let's bring on the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis, always a pleasure.
Good morning, Stacey Brown, and we certainly welcome our guests. On behalf of Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair, who is publisher of the Forward Times in Houston, Texas, and all of our executive committee, all of whom are Black women, incidentally, as well as the 230 African-American owned newspapers and media companies across America. We're glad to be on this edition of Let It Be Known.
And Dr. Chavis, we start with the headlines this morning. Comedian Dave Chappelle said he's been disinvited to film festivals and no company or studio will entertain his new documentary because of the fallout from his controversial Netflix special, The Closer. And while he's willing to meet with the transgender community and Netflix employees who voiced outrage over his act, Chappelle made it clear that he wouldn't be bullied by anyone. He says to the transgender community, I am more than willing to give you an audience, but you will not summon me. He said, I am not bending to anyone's demand. In a video posted yesterday, Chappelle doubled down on his remarks from The Closer, in which many in the LGBTQ community called homophobic. He says, I said what I said. He also clarified reports that he has sought meetings with transgender Netflix employees angered by his special. He says it's been said in the press that I was invited to speak to the transgender employees of Netflix and I refused. That is not true. If they had invited me, I would have accepted it, although I am confused about what we would be speaking about. Chappelle stood firm, Dr. Chavis, in his defense and in his resolve of his stand-up, The Closer. And we've talked about that on this program, and we understand that everybody has a point of view.
Yes, I think that, first of all, Dave Chappelle is one of the world's leading comedians. And I think sometimes we take a comic's remarks out of context and try to make it like it's a social justice platform. I think Dave Chappelle will survive this. I think that, if anything, more people are going to watch his program on Netflix than less. So Dave Chappelle, I believe, is going to be all right. I just wanted to make a comment about the first news item about Rittenhouse. The judge in that case in Wisconsin is really setting it up for an appeal. Obviously, the judge favors what Rittenhouse did. That's why he doesn't want to refer to the two people he murdered. He didn't kill them. He murdered them with a high-powered rifle. He left Illinois and went to Wisconsin, to support white supremacy and not to call the people he killed victims of his racial outrage. It puts the judge in question, puts the whole criminal justice system in question. But to me, it's a setup, because obviously, whichever way the verdict goes, Rittenhouse is going to appeal. And when the judge makes errors in the trial, even before the jury gets impaneled, then that is going to be grounds for appeal. And so no matter what, even if Rittenhouse is convicted, Rittenhouse is going to appeal. And now the judge is giving him reasons to appeal. So this is all a setup. We all know that Rittenhouse has raised money from all over the country. He's become a poster child for a new generation of young people who believe in racial violence, who believe in racial oppression, and who embody systemic racism. So I think everybody in Wisconsin, we need to vote some of these judges out of office because they are clearly on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that in a few moments with our guest this morning. But also in the news this morning, Dr. Chavis, Alabama Republican Governor Kay Ivey ordered state agencies to resist the Biden administration's coronavirus vaccine mandates, pledging to fight the White House in court. In her executive order, the governor says state officials should not penalize any business or individual for ignoring federal vaccine mandates. It also says that even when compelled to enforce federal laws, state officials should, quote, take all practical steps to notify the affected that Alabama opposes all vaccine mandates. Her attorney general is preparing a lawsuit to stop the mandate. She said Alabama residents are overwhelmingly opposed to those what she calls outrageous Biden mandates. And she says, I stand with them. But an independent poll of Alabama residents speaks totally different than what the governor has issued there. Most Alabama residents do welcome a mask mandate. It's unbelievable.
And Stacey, the people that are dying in Alabama because of the governor's stance, I think the governor needs to be prosecuted in Alabama. The governor of Texas needs to be prosecuted in Texas. The governor of Florida needs to be prosecuted, and the governor of Georgia needs to be prosecuted because they're aiding and abetting the loss of life. They're refusing to follow federal guidelines, and as a result of their refusal to follow federal guidelines, it encourages the residents of their states not to follow federal guidelines on COVID, and that's why the death rate continues. These governors, yes, they have a right to take a position, but they also have a right to be held accountable for the against public health, public policy that they're trying to implement. And this is the same thing around, states' rights. And then you hear a governor talk about states' rights versus federal rights. Racism is at play.
Yeah, and you mentioned that before, Dr. Chavis, that she should be prosecuted. You mentioned others like that. And you bring up, I think, a great point. When you are endangering lives and lives are being lost, generally, if you look at the statute, that's manslaughter.
Yes.
So
anyway, I think, that's why the Black press, we have to try to call it like it is. We report the news, but we also advocate for freedom, justice, and equality.
Absolutely. So also in the news this morning, led by Chair Joyce Beatty of Ohio, members of the Congressional Black Caucus said yesterday that a deal is imminent on President Joe Biden's Build Back Better priorities, including the $3.5 trillion spending plan and the $1 trillion infrastructure agenda. Congresswoman Beatty said today is a good day for the Congressional Black Caucus, for the 3rd District, and for the nation. She says over the past 2 years, she says amid the pandemic, COVID, and the destructive Trump administration, we never gave up in our fight for Black families. Finally, we now have a transformative president who hears our voices and is taking action alongside us. Rep. Beatty continued, we diligently championed our priorities and are proud to see their inclusion in this reconciliation package. In the past several weeks alone, she says she's met with the White House more than 5 times to demand that Black families be prioritized in this final package. And it's important to note that the president is scheduled to fly out of the country this coming Thursday, tomorrow, in fact. And there's a mandate to get this done before he leaves. So we're going to continue to watch Dr. Chavis action on the Hill today and early tomorrow and see where this reconciliation package ends up.
Right. We thank Congresswoman Joyce Beatty for her leadership as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She's another freedom fighting sister. I'm so proud of all of our brothers and sisters who serve in the Congress of the United States.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chavis, as we've already talked about, the Wisconsin judge presiding over Kyle Rittenhouse homicide case has laid out his final ground rules. The trial starts on Monday. Let's bring in James Wright of the Washington Informer and Barrington Salmon, who writes for Black Press USA, the FinalCall, and other publications in the Black Press family. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, let's just get right to it, Barrington. You heard what the judge said. He says these homicide victims are not to be called victims. They are to be called either rioters, looters, or arsonists. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Well, yeah, we've seen more of it in the past 4, 5, 6 years than we have before because the beast has taken off its mask. and now we see it as it really is. So, I mean, for me, it's instructive. I wonder if the judge is elected or if he's appointed. And then the next question for me is that, we'll say that we should vote him out, but in a lot of cases, but Black communities, Black folks, they're more concerned with larger elections. They don't vote that much for school boards, for judges, and for other municipal officials. I'm not even quite sure what we can do besides expressing our outrage. Hopefully he could get voted out, but I don't know. It just makes me feel like this boy's gonna walk.
Well, he's had a lot of help, right? Celebrities and other folks have contributed to his defense. They have, for a time there, they hit him out. So he's had a lot of help. James Wright, the judge said that the word is loaded. The word victim is loaded. What's your thoughts on this, James? What was your reaction?
This is the most ridiculous thing that I have ever heard. And I'm going to tell you why. Because judges are supposed to be impartial. They're supposed to adhere to the law. And they even swear to that when they become judges. But this is an example of how some right-wing people, instead of honoring what they're supposed to do as leaders in the community, as well as leaders in the legal profession, have decided to take on a cause and put themselves in, as Dr. Chavis says, setting up for an appeal. That's not what judges are supposed to do. Judges are supposed to have flawless trials where if they were to go to appeal, it would be denied. But he's doing that, and he knows what he's doing. And this is why the Pew Research Center says that our judiciary has about a 20% favorable rating, because of all of these bad judges being selected by these presidents, particularly 45, who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're weighing in on the cases they preside over.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, one of the things they want to introduce is the video of police. The defense wants to introduce the video of police officers giving Kyle Rittenhouse water, patting them on the back, and things of that nature, because they say that the defense said that the police encouraged this behavior, they encouraged him to do what he did.
Well, I think that's accurate. I think the police did encourage him. I mean, first of all, he's traveling interstate, leaving one state, going into another state, heavily armed, doing a civil unrest. And so how can people, vigilantes, we know vigilantes now have been authorized in Texas. Vigilantes were authorized in Wisconsin. And these are the states, again, I have to keep calling them out. Wisconsin, Alabama, Georgia, Florida. I know a lot of people are listening from those states. This is the contest. It's between those who want to see America have a true democracy and those that want to see America to have a separate and unequal framework where systemic racism is the rule of the day in the judiciary, in the congressional situation, and when they're redrawing districts. All these things are interconnected. These are not separate matters. I hope no one sees what happened in Wisconsin with this judge in the Rittenhouse case as isolated. This is symptomatic of the whole systemic racism problem that African Americans and other communities of color face.
Yeah. And Barrington, I know you have tackled issues like this for years. You've been in this business for about 30 years or so, and nothing surprises you anymore. But in this case, his lawyers, it's so interesting, Barrington, because his lawyers claim that hunting laws allowed him to carry this type of weapon during those fatal shootings. Barrington, well, who was he hunting? Or what was he hunting?
It's clear who he was hunting, because two of the people he was hunting are dead. One seriously injured. I'm sitting down here thinking, I'm looking at Reverend Chavis and remembering the ordeals he went through when he was in Wilmington. And I'm just thinking that the more things change, the more they remain the same. It is incumbent on us to remain vigilant. I mean, for me, I had a conversation with Bill Fletcher Jr. Like 4 or 5 years ago for a story I was writing about the final call, and talking about, the things that Republicans were doing to cement their power and to marginalize people who look like us. And he said that if we weren't careful, we would end up with a white minority apartheid state in this country. And everything that I see since that comment points in that direction. They are. I think Democrats made a huge mistake under President Obama by not focusing on state and local races. That's what Republicans did. They are in control of all of these state municipal positions, and that is allowing them to do the redistricting. That is allowing the governor of Texas and Florida and all these other places to put in place these laws that are basically being used to crush dissent, to marginalize black and brown people. And I just think that we the big mistake that we make is that we keep on trying to fight by the so-called rules. They don't have any rules. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to fight fire with fire. But we're afraid to do that. But our freedom should be such that we decide that we do whatever we need to do to be free of the chains the shackles that these people want to put back on us. Because it ain't pretty, and it ain't gonna be pretty.
Yeah, Barrington takes the by any means necessary approach. I know on a lot of things, a lot of issues. And Dr. Chavez, I know as he said, look, you know firsthand about this. Unfortunately, you know firsthand. You've experienced so much. We know about the Wilmington 10 unjustly incarcerated for almost a decade, but yet it didn't break your spirit. What keeps the fight going, Dr. Chavez, and how does the fight continue today?
Well, I think we have to keep the fight going. No, I did not allow what happened to us to break our spirit, and neither did the members of the Wilmington 10. It was an ordeal. I think every generation is faced with challenges. And the reason why I'm optimistic, the reason why I'm not cynical, the reason why I'm not hopeless, and the reason why I don't get overly perturbed when you have situations like what's going on in Wisconsin or Florida or Texas or Alabama now, and even Mississippi. I think that we have to realize that the demographics are in our favor. The change in the browning of America is in our favor. What we have to do now, we still have too many African Americans who don't vote. We still have too many African Americans who are not protecting themselves from COVID-19. We still have too many brothers and sisters in some of our cities where we're killing each other. We don't talk about that, but we have to talk about that. Sometimes we internalize our oppression, and then we become the objects and the subjects of our own oppression. And I think that we have to practice more self-love, more self-togetherness. We have to build the right coalitions. I think there are more people of goodwill in America than people of ill will. I think Barrington is right. Apartheid was never a majority situation,
right?
And keep in mind, when apartheid started in South Africa, where did they get it from? They got it from the southern United States. Apartheid wasn't first started in South Africa. Apartheid started in Europe, then it went to America, then it went to Africa. And I think that to a certain extent, it is still prevalent. You see people taking down the statues. Yeah, and I'm glad that these statues have been taken. They're going to change the names of the military bases, all for the Confederacy. But the mindset of white supremacy is still there. And we have to always be on guard, like passing the baton. I'm very, how can I say, enthusiastic about this new generation of young people coming up. I think they're conscious. I think they're looking for ways to move forward in the Black Lives Matter movement. I think they should learn from history and not repeat history. And I think that the things that we should be doing and we have to be doing is what we report in the Black press. I don't want people to get discouraged because what the judge said in Wisconsin, Stacey, was not just to give benefit to Rittenhouse. It was to give a signal to other judges around the country to weigh in and to do everything they can to make sure that the demographic change, the browning of America, doesn't lead to a substantial economic and political change in America, which it will happen. It's inevitable. The people who lynch people thought by lynching us that they were going to have the rule of the day. That did not happen. And of course, we have to try to prevent lynching. We have to not only go after what happens in the aftermath of a lynching, but we need to deal with the lynchers. To me, the judge in Wisconsin is a lyncher.
Yeah, we saw also the situation in St. Louis, the protest, just a peaceful march of Black Lives Matter demonstrators, peaceful march with the couple pulling the guns on them, and they basically tossed the charges against them. And look, we spent, Dr. Chavez knows, we spent 2 years at the Bill Cosby trial, and people have their opinions, but what we saw there from that judge was blatant racism. And now we're seeing that, of course, in this Kyle Rittenhouse trial from a judge. Blatant racism. Bobby Henry says the power of the Black press are the voices that carry the message of freedom to more than the chains that binds us. He says freedom comes by paying a price, and some of us are not willing to pay the price of discomfort. So, James, we see a lot. We're seeing more and more, as has been spoken of, more and more of these judges. They are out of line. They're out of order. How do they get there, James?
Well, they got there because they felt empowered by, and Barrington mentioned this off camera, about the Heritage Foundation, but also the Federalist Society that actively went out to recruit conservative judges so they can be put on these lists to become federal judges. And this has happened on the state level, but it's happened in a different context because, as you everybody here knows, many state judges are elected. And so they've done that and set up that apparatus. What we have to do is we have to counter that apparatus. We have to have our own list of judges. But also this, Dr. Martin Luther King talked about in his letter in the Birmingham jail. He was appealing to the white moderates and the white progressives. He wanted them to step up because they knew what was going on is wrong. You have a lot of white progressives and a lot of white moderates who know what is going on with that judge is wrong, but they need to speak up and speak out because Dr. Chavez is certainly right. America is becoming browner and browner. And they have to be, if they want to be a part of this, they have to speak up in order to see that justice is done.
Yeah, and Barrington, I want you to respond. Nicole McDaniel writes, the more the supremacists see these signs that Dr. Chavez mentioned, the statues coming down and the demographics changing, the harder and more blatantly they will fight. It will get worse before it gets better, so we need to be prepared for that.
I agree 100%. The thing for me, my wife and I went to a lecture at the beginning of 2020 with a guy named Jonathan Wetzel. He's a professor at Vanderbilt University. Did a survey, wrote a book, Dying of Whiteness. And he said that he interviewed like maybe 1,700 white people. And they said that they prefer to die rather than allow Black and brown people, anybody who's not quote unquote white, to have access to quality education, to quality healthcare, and all of the things that make humans humans. We're dealing with what I consider to be a death cult mindset, where these folks have decided that if they become the quote unquote minority, that they prefer to destroy this country before they allow Black and brown people to have our space and to excel and to experience the things that we want to experience as human beings. It's a war. I'm much more pessimistic than Dr. Chavez, because I honestly believe that these fools will destroy this country before they allow us our space. And for me, we need to have a multi-pronged approach. I'm not even sure about the voting thing, because I look at what President Biden's done with the Haitians, and they're quick to always jettison issues of Black issues and concerns. So I'm not even, he's not our savior. The system is a problem, an issue for me, because it was never built to take care of us. But I believe that that we need to do everything. We need to do what Dr. Chavis said. We need to vote. We need to apply political pressure. But we also need to go to the gun ranges and learn to shoot. We all need to get our weapons, because we ain't supposed to be sitting down waiting for them to come kill us. So we gotta have a multi-pronged approach.
Well, I'm going to let Dr. Chavis respond to that.
Well, again, I think that I always believe that we should elevate the discussion and to try to focus. I do still believe that this is a question about the oneness of humanity versus the separateness of humanity. And what separates us from black and white, brown, Asian, Native American is a pseudo claim, and I think that's the problem. White supremacy is going to eventually be eradicated. Why? Because the world is changing. Information is changing. People who are intelligent, no matter what your race is, know that this thing of the past, if the Confederacy was right, they would have won the Civil War. And if apartheid was right, South Africa would still be apartheid. So I think that I look at this in a historical framework, and I appreciate the perspectives that have been shared this morning. But I think the Black press, we have an obligation to lift our people up. We have an obligation, yes, to tell them the truth, but tell them the truth in a way that we don't start fastening ourselves down in foxholes and just let the inevitable happen. I think we can respond, and I think we can turn this whole thing around. My optimism is based on our history. It's what Frederick Douglass said a long time ago. Freedom is a constant struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand, and we have to make our demands.
Yeah, well, we always appreciate the insights of Dr. Chavis. We recall that he does come up under the wings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In fact, as a young teenager, he worked under Dr. Martin Luther King. So we can see where Dr. Chavis's point of view comes across and his life experiences. So this has been a fantastic conversation, nothing short of what we expected from Barrington Salmon, from James Wright. Barrington, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to give us your last words.
Well, I hope that Reverend Chavis is right. But for me, this is not much different from what our ancestors dealt with, and they made it through. They did what they needed to do to allow us to get to this place. So we just got to do the same thing. We got to fight on every front. We got to continue to retain and hold our humanity in the face of this onslaught of racism and white, I don't call it supremacy, white attempts at white domination, and teach our children to be strong and resilient and to fight back.
Yeah, well, Barrington,
be victims.
Yeah, Barrington, keep writing. We'll keep reading, and please do come back. James, 30 seconds, James.
Sure. Just like the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society have their list of people who should be judges, we should have our list too. And we need to make sure that the judiciary is balanced in terms of having people of goodwill on the bench, people who are open-minded, and people who understand they are judges, not legislators in black robes. And saying that, I mean that it is time for us as Black people to pay more attention to the judiciary instead of just the executive and the legislative branches.
Well, thanks again, James Wright, Barrington Salmon. And of course, it is always a privilege to do this every morning with our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. We really appreciate you, of course. Everybody, we're going to continue to watch this Rittenhouse trial. We're going to bring to you. You can check out blackpressusa.com and all of our member papers around the country to keep you up to date on this, particularly our papers in Wisconsin. Let it be known. Remember this, in the words of Mark Twain, the secret to getting ahead is getting started. We will see you tomorrow.